Welcome back. I hope that you are making progress on the dance, minor romp, and a Turkish tune. Today, we'll focus in on more musical details in several of these pieces. We'll check in on your scales, and we'll harmonize a minor melody. We'll also experiment with a new rhythm pattern. So let's get started with our lesson. I'd like to begin by reviewing the dance by Diabelli one last time. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. I recognize that you may need more practice time with this piece, especially if you are playing along with me. So please feel free to keep it on your practice list, even if I don't include it on your assignment at the end of the lesson. Next, I'd like to work through a Turkish tune. I'd like to play it with separate hands first so you can really compare your performance to mine. Remember to note where any problems occur. Let's do the right hand first. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. Now, let's play the left hand alone. Don't forget the rest on beat 1 of measure 3. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. Rest. I find counting out loud really helpful when playing the left hand alone. It will help prevent you from jumping in too early in measure 3. I'd like to try playing this with both hands next. Notice that I'll take it slower than we did when playing hands separately. This is a good tip when you first start working on coordinating the hands in challenging pieces. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. If you are finding this piece challenging, that is to be expected. Both hands are moving more independently than they have up to this point. For example, going from measure 1 to 2, both the right and left hand descend a third. However, they will use different fingers on the descent. But moving to the downbeat of measure 4, the right hand moves up by step while the left hand leaps down a fourth. This is awkward, yet it's the kind of movement that pianists have to learn to do. I notice that on beat 1 of measure 4, both of my hands will play finger 4. I use this feeling of playing finger 4s here as an anchor of sorts. I sometimes call it grounding myself. Then I can look ahead to the next challenge. In measures 5 and 6, the hands begin by moving in parallel downward motion. But on beat 3 of measure 6, although both hands play a third, the left hand turns around to leap up a third before the hands resume moving in parallel motion again. These kinds of changes in direction and intervals can play tricks on the mind as we process the visual cues and on the hands before we have acquired the correct motor skills. So, when I practice, I break down measures 5 through 8 into smaller sections. I do try to stop on a downbeat, however, so that I don't inadvertently get into the habit of pausing at bar lines. My first practice spot might be from measure 5 to beat 1 of measure 7. Then I would practice measure 7, beat 1, to the end. I mark my score like this so that I'm not tempted to move on before I've internalized the motor skills. I actually loop or replay each practice spot until it is automatic and I am confident in my ability to play it securely. This is how my practicing might look and sound. Here's practice spot number 1. Again. And again. Now that I have it, I start at practice spot number 2. Then I link 1 and 2 together. I may encounter problems making the transition and need to play this several times. Once I'm comfortable with the trickiest spots, I go back to practice spot number 3 and work on it just as I had for spot number 1 and number 2. In this way, I like to think of practicing as musical triage. I identify the top 2 or 3 worst problems. Then I isolate them, being sure to choose a small enough section of music that I can fix in a relatively short amount of time. Then I move on to the next problem. I prioritize the problems, then I work down the list. I really encourage you to practice this way. You'll make more efficient use of your time, and you won't be ingraining mistakes by playing them over and over. Now, you will likely find that you need to rehearse these problem areas again at subsequent practice sessions. But hopefully you are able to fix them faster, and one day you'll sit down and these places won't be problems anymore. Once you have the mechanics of the practice segment solidified, be sure to incorporate the dynamics. Remember, balance between the melody and accompaniment and dynamic contrasts are a critical part of a musical performance, so don't forget to work on those. How about if we check in on minor romp next? Although the hand independence, or what you might think of as coordination between the hands, isn't as complex in minor romp, the right hand must execute more intricate articulation. So let's try minor romp together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and play. I'd like to try that again. This time, even though you will play both hands, really try to assess how well you are playing the legato and staccato articulation. I'll go just a little slower. 1, 2, and play. Now, were you able to listen for the balance between the melody and accompaniment and the dynamic changes? Let's play it one last time and try to put all of these details together to create a musical performance. 1, 2, and play. You may have noticed that at the beginning of minor romp, above the first measure, there is a word, allegro, and a metronome indication of a quarter note equals 160. Generally in music, when a composer wishes to indicate how fast the piece will go, he or she indicates the tempo using either a word or a metronome marking, or both, as we see here. Frequently, the tempo markings are Italian words, so we'll start adding those terms to our musical vocabulary. Allegro is the Italian word for fast or lively speed. Since all tempo markings are relative, and later we'll see how the meter influences tempo too, it can be helpful when the metronome marking is also indicated. While I won't put minor romp on your practice assignment, you may wish to review it again, and maybe you could check to see if you are really playing it at an allegro tempo. I'd also like to mention that in order to maintain repertoire that we've already learned, we need to play it fairly frequently. So, if this is a piece that you want to keep on your piano playlist, please be sure to revisit it at least a couple of times throughout the week. We haven't harmonized any melodies in a couple of lessons, so I'd like to try one now. If you look at this example, you'll see that it has one flat, B flat in the key signature. So, the piece is either in F major or D minor. Because we have to supply the left-hand chords, we must know whether this is in a major or minor key. If you play the melody, you'd hear that it is in D minor. You would also notice that your right hand remains in a D minor five-finger pattern throughout this example. Additionally, below the staff, I have indicated that the excerpt is in D minor. When musicians analyze music, this is where we indicate the key. Then we would supply the Roman numeral analysis next to the right of this written text. You'll see that I have short lines below the staff. Each time you have a line, you'll change your chord. If you look below the staff, you'll see directions for harmonizing the melody, followed by tips for choosing the appropriate chord. In measure 1, we will have to play 2 different chords. The first chord covers beats 1 and 2. Since we only have Ds and an F in those beats, that is to say that most of the melody notes are D, F, or A, which are the 3 notes of the D minor tonic chord, the tonic chord should be played here. Remember, since the chord is minor, we use a lowercase Roman numeral 1. In the second half of that measure, we have only E's and a G. If we look at the tips for choosing chords, we see that G could be part of the subdominant or the dominant 7th chord. But E is only part of the 5-7 chord, so it will create less dissonance if we harmonize the second half of this measure with a 5-7 chord. I'd recommend playing 5-6-5 here, since that's what you've practiced in your chord progressions, so you could even write that inversion in below the staff. I'll let you figure out the other chords on your own during practice, but let's agree to put a 4 chord in measure 2 on beat 3. This will create a little variety, and then we'll be playing the same chords when we play this together next time. You could play a dominant 7th here too, but I think you'll enjoy hearing the subdominant chord in the second half of this measure. The other item of note on this score is the tempo marking. This is marked moderato, which is the Italian term for a moderate tempo. Try to achieve the suggested tempo before our next lesson. How about if I play this for you so you'll know what you are aiming for during practice? I'd like to have you play again and get back to a little technique. Let's try the G major scale, 1 octave with separate hands, so not the tetrachord scale. Let's play the left hand first. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, let's try the right hand, G major. 1, 2, and play. Since our pieces have been more challenging during the past few lessons, we haven't done much sight reading. So let's look at a sight reading example in G major. You'll see that the right hand extends beyond the 5-finger pattern here to encompass the entire scale. First, let's clap the right hand rhythmic pattern. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. Now, take a moment and shadow your right hand on the keyboard. I'll point out that for the first 2 measures, you are in a G major 5-finger pattern. But in measure 3, your thumb will cross under to C just as though you are playing the G major scale. However, you immediately skip up a third to E. Okay, this is tricky, so you may need to shadow a few more times. Let's try playing it together right now. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Three and 4 and. Thumb up a third. I'll let you work through your sight reading practice steps as you prepare this example for our next lesson. Because this is challenging for a sight reading exercise, I'd like you to play it slower than moderato. How about if you try it at an andante pace? Andante is the Italian term for a walking pace. Just be sure not to walk too quickly. In fact, I won't give you a specific metronome marking, but I wouldn't advise going faster than a quarter note equals 60. I'd like to play another piece for you. Instead of having you look at the score, I'd like you to tap quarter notes on your lap. So let's start tapping and keep tapping while I play. On your lap, tap 1, 2, 3. You may recognize that melody. It's a famous minuet by Beethoven. I'm going to play it once more. This time, try to tap the right hand rhythm as I play. 1, 2, 3. Did you notice if the moving notes in the right hand were even or slightly unsteady with a lilt? Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Indeed, the right hand rhythm had some uneven notes. Long, short, long, short, long, short, long. These are what we call dotted rhythms. While we will learn how to count them precisely next time, for now, just tapping and saying long, short, long, short, long, short, long will work. In fact, this week, I'd like you to practice your G major scale with this long, short rhythmic pattern in the right hand. Let me show you how it will go, then you can copy me. Notice that I don't repeat the top note. Won't you try it with me this time? 1, 2, 3, play. We just clapped or tapped and played dotted rhythms that involve fast notes. We'll explore how those look in musical notation next time. But now I'd like to introduce another kind of rhythm pattern that has a dotted note, but this one is a dotted quarter followed by a single eighth note. You'll recall from very early in the course that when we add a dot after a note head, this is not a staccato dot, but the dot after the note head, it adds half of that note's value to the total count. Previously, we saw that a dotted half note got 3 beats because the half note is worth 2 beats. Half of 2 is 1, so 2 plus 1 equals 3 beats. What if we have a dotted quarter note now? As you know, a quarter note gets 1 beat. Half of 1 is a half. Normally, we see these half beats as pairs of eighth notes. So it is conceivable that we hold a dotted quarter note for 1.5 beats, then we would follow it up with a single eighth note to complete the second half of the beat. In fact, this is a very common rhythm in music. It looks like this, and we clap and count it like so. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You see, in the first measure, the dot after the quarter note, which we are holding, is the beginning of beat 2. Then we clap the single eighth on the second half or the and of beat 2. Similarly, we hold the next dotted quarter through the beginning of beat 4 and clap the final eighth note in that measure on the and of beat 4. Then, in the next measure, when we hold the half note, it's a good idea to count the subdivisions 1 and 2 and to prevent cheating the note of its full value. Won't you clap it with me this time? Be sure to count out loud. 1, 2, here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So let's look at a melody that I'd like you to practice for next time. We'll add some chords to it at the next lesson, but for now, let's be sure that we understand the rhythm since it includes some dotted quarter eighth note rhythms. There is a lot going on in this melody, but I chose it because I thought you might recognize it. If you don't, that's okay. This starts on an anacrusis or a pickup note, meaning that the first note that we play comes in on the and of beat 4. I recommend counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 before coming in on the and of 4. This is how the rhythm goes for the first 4 measures. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Please join me as we clap and count this time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, this time I'll play the melody for the first 4 measures, and I'd like you to clap and count again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'll play it once more. This time, I'd like you to observe my hand position. Please note how my thumb is extended slightly lower. However, my hand remains relaxed. I'll play the entire example this time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'll warn you that even though you recognize the tune and it sounds cheery, it will take some careful practice before you master it. Next time, we'll add the left hand chords, but only work on the right hand prior to the next lesson. Well, I think this is a good stopping point for today. Before the next lesson, be sure to practice the G major scale, separate hands. Use the long, short, dotted rhythm pattern in the right hand. Review major and minor finger patterns and chord progressions. In particular, be sure to review E minor because we'll be playing in that key next time. Practice a Turkish tune, try to finish learning, and practice isolating the problem spots as I demonstrated today. Work on your harmonization from Lesson 16, the sight reading from Lesson 16, and the Muffin Man, the right hand only. Memorize your new tempo terms. Start coming up with a piano playlist. These are the pieces that you'll have ready to perform or play at all times, even if that performance is only for yourself or for your cat and not a public audience. There's quite a lot of material here, so give yourself ample time to prepare it before our next lesson. In the meantime, happy practicing.